English spelling is terrible. Unique has a silent U-E. Though and tough do not rhyme. Every C in Pacific Ocean is pronounced differently. And what is even going on in the word Q? Normally, when languages have insane spelling, they fix it with a spelling reform. English actually has had spelling reforms, but English is already so messed up that each spelling reform just makes it worse. So I've decided to attempt at making the first useful English spelling reform. First thing we need to figure out is how different we should make it. If you make the spelling reform too understandable for English speakers, it will be too hard for people with other first languages to understand. But if you make the spelling reform easy for people with other first languages to understand, it will be too hard for native speakers to understand. There's also the problem of making it easy to type. These are all the characters that aren't numbers or symbols that my keyboard lets me write. So these will be the only symbols we can use. These are the only diacritics that appear on all 5 vowels. This is a simplified version of English's vowels. There are more than 5, so we can't just use the 5 vowels English already has. There are 3 things that we're going to need diacritics for: stress, variants of a vowel, and a variant of a vowel with stress. I'm marking them with an acute accent, an umlaut, and a circumflex. The circumflex would make a little bit more sense if I used a macron instead of the umlaut, but I hate using macrons for variants of a vowel, so I'm using the umlaut instead. This is how I decided to romanize most of the vowels. The near low back vowel could have either been romanized with an E with an umlaut or an O with an umlaut. I ended up deciding the E because it looks slightly better. The ah sound is not very common and is most often not distinguished between ah or aw, so I could just clump it in with one of those sounds. I romanized the ah sound with an A and the aw sound with an O with an umlaut. This is a very simplified chart of English diphthongs. I'm going to romanize I with AY, ow with OW, and oi with OY. To make it feel a little more familiar to native speakers, if a word ends with an E, the E is silent, and the vowel before the last consonant is pronounced as shown on the screen. If these sounds can be represented by putting an E at the end of the word, then that's how you write it. But if you can't represent it by putting a vowel at the end of the word, then you'll just write it how the previous chart shows. This chart shows a simplified version of English consonants. I'll do the easy ones first. Ma is romanized with an N, na is romanized with an N, pa is romanized with a P, ba is romanized with a B, ta is romanized with a T, da is romanized with a D, fa is romanized with an F, va is romanized with a V, wa is romanized with a W, ra is romanized with an R, la is romanized with an L, ya is romanized with an Y, cha is romanized with a CH, sha is romanized with an SH, and I romanized ha with an H. I decided to romanize ja with a J because lots of different languages pronounce J differently, and je is like English's way. Je is very rare and basically is just a variant of s, so I'm romanizing it with an S. I've decided that if z appears between vowels, it is romanized with an S, but in all other cases, it is romanized with a Z. S would be romanized with a C before an I or an E, but in all other cases, it would be romanized with an S. K would be romanized with C unless it is followed by an I or an E, then it is romanized with a K. And I decided to romanize J with a G before an I or an E, too. The cluster ng happens a lot in English, so I didn't want to romanize the ng sound with ng, because ngg would look weird. And I didn't want to romanize it with any other digraphs either. The only variants of n my keyboard would let me type was nye and an n with an acute accent. and I didn't want to romanize it with enye, so I used the N with an acute accent. There are some faults to this spelling reform, such as a lot of very common things spelling would be changed drastically, and people would have to learn new acronyms. And I mainly made this for American dialects, so if you have an English dialect or a Canadian dialect or any other dialect of English, the spelling reform might not be good for you. Also, I have a secret. The secret is like, comment, and subscribe.